tell their stories of coming to Austin. A lot of people came here in '73. I think Ray Benson came here. A lot of musicians came here in '73. So that whole thing was gathering force. In fact, I got here on July the 5th, 1973. That was the day after Willie Nelson's first 4th of July picnic. So everybody in town when I got here was talking about Willie Nelson and Jerry Jeff Walker and Waylon Jennings, all these guys I'd never heard of. But the whole town was electrified because that big thing had just happened out west of town. And so that was supercharging the air. And then I went to Mother Earth, which was a rock and roll club. Too Smooth was playing, which was a kick-ass rock and roll band in Austin in the '70s. Really good, good hardcore rock and roll. They had this incredible dance floor and an incredible light show that really blew my mind, Boy from the Country and all that. And then we went across the river to the Split Rail, which was country western scene, progressive country with Marcia Ball and as Frida and the Fire Dogs. So that started my whole appreciation of Austin as a music scene. And I'll tell you, at the Split Rail especially, it was so meaningful to discover the hippies and the rednecks sitting together enjoying the music, because at that time the hippies and the rednecks were fighting. You know, in fact, just not too much before that, the Pacifica radio station in Houston had been firebombed by the rednecks. So it was violent clashes back then. And at the Split Rail, I saw these rednecks and hippies sitting together, and I chose a door by the exit because I thought for sure there was going to be a big fight after everybody sat around drinking all night. But there were no fights. Everybody just sat around digging the music, and I went, wow, the music is bringing these two groups together. That was magic. I thought then Austin was a magical place.
Maybe the most famous example is Stevie Ray Vaughan recorded at Steamboat, and we did a midnight broadcast from Steamboat when it was on 6th Street of Stevie pre-album deal. Very famous version of him doing a live Tin Pan Alley, which we, after the broadcast, dubbed onto a cartridge so that we could play it as a request. And that song, and I can name 3 or 4 others, you know, that it existed, you know, the rarefied air that it existed, very requested. I mean, unbelievable, the people always calling for it. It got played daily, or maybe a couple times a day. People called for a long time before that was ever known, you know, as a vinyl. Came out then as a studio version on the 2nd album, and then, of course, the Steamboat posthumously became a CD, so people finally got to hear the whole show. It's one example. Live radio broadcast, piece of history, you know. Thank goodness Wayne Bell, the program director at the time, saved that tape, that 2-track audio air check of that concert. I will say one thing about Stevie. You know, catching him at the beginning before the first album, he was always a very humble guy. I never saw him any other way but being a humble man. But seeing him at the very beginning as the hungry artist and determined, and you know, we've got a deal. Okay, our album's about to come. You know, that kind of thing. Always looking forward to the next level that he was approaching. It's interesting. It was interesting to go back and listen to these interviews and hear each of those stages and hear more confidence maybe come in his voice the next time around with album number 2. Or I'm afraid to say at certain points things lost a little bit because he was kind of losing his way, as is well documented. You could hear it in the interviews. And then hearing him come back strong again, you know, with the In Step album. He was a renewed man. He was an evangelist, you know. So they're all taking over time. If you compress this stuff or telescope it, it's an amazing comparison side by side, you know. And some of those interviews, actually, I dubbed them off, so they do exist somewhere. I gave a copy to Janek Petoskey for his Stevie Ray Vaughan book with Crawford, I've forgotten. And Carrie Lee wrote a book, and so they were able then to have quotes, you know. They could fit those in with their proper places in the book, so they ended up being used and being useful, even though they no longer exist.
Good God.
that you can remember? What's the first thing that comes to mind? I know you've had millions, but
We used to do a show called the T-Bird River Fest, and it seemed like, well, what it was the T-Birds would invite friends of theirs to come and perform with them, and you'd get a wide variety of bands. Probably one of the first times the Red Hot Chili Peppers played. I can remember Bonnie Raitt, and the list goes on and on. All these special guests, and it always rained. It seemed to always rain during Riverfest. In fact, we joked about it being Rainfest, but they had put a tarp up this one year, and it rained and it filled with water so much that the tarp started to sink down like this. And some joker thought, well, I'll just get a big pole and push it up and let all the water drain off, and he poked a hole in the tarp and it just flooded the entire stage. And so that none of the musicians went to go on stage. Well, Stevie Ray and Jimmy Vaughn took one amplifier and one double neck guitar, and Stevie sat down in a chair and Jimmy Vaughn reached around him and they played a song. Actually, they played 3 songs. And it's probably one of the most memorable nights I will remember, because they were brave enough to go out on that stage in that water and plug in and entertain the audience there when nobody else would go out on the stage.
We got this guy Stevie Vaughn, little Stevie. I said, oh yeah, I know Stevie, of course, because I was there the opening night for Antone's on 6th Street when it first opened, and that's where I really got to know Stevie, although I had really met him through the one night here in Austin. But at any rate, I knew Stevie was an incredible guitar player, and I really liked his brother's guitar work a whole lot. And I also knew from a late night, early morning Antone's drunken, wiped out conversation that I had with Stevie and Mark Bino, sitting at the table with an empty club around us, and hearing Stevie pound the table and say, I am going to be a star, Mark. I can feel it. Mark Bino, I'm going to be a star. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, Stevie, do you know what you're saying? Do you know how many great guitar players there are in Texas, and how many I've seen that felt just like you that couldn't be a star? I mean, it takes so much more than just, I want to be a star and I'm a great guitar player. And it's not taking anything away from people that are great guitar players by saying that, but the business is the business. And I knew what a long shot it was. So Chesley says, hey, Edie Johnson brought Stevie out to meet us. What do you think of this? Fabulous. The guy's a great guitar player. He says, well, I think so too. He says, I've shipped the tapes around. He says, I've talked to people. He says, Jerry Wexler likes him so much. He wants Stevie to come and play Montreux. And he says, and my good friend, and this was the clincher for me, my good friend John Hammond, I'm talking to John Hammond about Stevie, and John is going to retire from Columbia, from CBS, and he's told me that Stevie will be his first project when he leaves CBS. And I said, well, now you're talking, Chesley, because I've heard all this before. I'm going to take this artist, and he had a real plan, and I knew that Chesley knew John Hammond, and I knew the power of that statement. That was, I knew Bill Ham before ZZ Top. Before there was a ZZ Top. And I remember when Bill Ham decided to manage this little old band from Texas out of Houston, and he worked for London Records, independent promotion man, also not independently wealthy, and he quit this great job with London Records to take on this little band nobody'd heard of, and he brought his little 45 over to us at KTSA, KTFM, and boy, we played the heck out of that and charted it way up to help our friend Bill Ham all we could. And that charting helped his former label, London Records, said, oh, hey Bill, here's this record and it's happening. And so they got an album deal with London based on the way it was going with the single, and based on the fact that they knew Bill Ham was one heck of a promotion man. And London was the label the Rolling Stones were on in those days. I said, Bill Ham, London, got him on London. Chesley's going to get him on Epic, a great producer. This is going to happen. I really, knew something potentially was going to happen.
Rock and roll's always been my life.
So when did you first come to Austin?
Actually, I lived here for about a year in 1980, and then...
With your parents?
No, with 2 guys. But that's another story.
Oh, okay.
But we were roommates, it's all good.
At the end of Slash playing whatever song it was, Heart Full of Soul maybe.
Basically,
South by Southwest.
It was South by Southwest, man. We came and we did a showcase, and this company from Chicago called Who Am I?
Yeah, I Am I.
Who Am I? Yeah. They wanted to sign us. They were like, we love your band. We want to sign you to our deal. So basically, he just walked us into TVT Records.
Music so divine. I'm a big fat fish in a little pond, but there's something pulling on my line. Yeah, feel like I'm missing something.
MusicTexas.com